The Looker. A man who wanted to rob me followed me through the town. This took place a while ago when I was still going to a school a state away. I grew up living in a rather comfy neighborhood with very little trouble, so I was completely unprepared for my friend's neighborhood. When I got there, it all seemed familiar to me, the streets, the buildings, but something seemed amiss. The people, they kept staring when we walked by, and my friend joked they could smell I wasn't from there. She asked me not to do anything stupid, and I agreed. We got to the supermarket and bought all we needed. Then on the way to the till, I pulled out my wallet and slipped out my card before a hand grasped my wallet and pushed it down. It was my friend. When I looked at her, she wasn't even looking at me. She was looking at the door where a group of young men were standing. One of them had his eyes directly on my wallet. "You shouldn't have done that," my friend said in frustration as we paid. Now you can imagine my confusion. I was a lost duck, and it must have been clear on my face because she added, "You should have only pulled out your card, not your wallet. Now he knows you have one. He's wondering what's inside it." She didn't say more after that, but as we headed to the door, she walked faster. And I was practically tripping over my feet. The guy stood there, dressed in black, with ripped jeans. His hands were in his pocket, and his cold, emotionless eyes were grinding in mine. Again, I felt a pinch on my shoulder, and my friend grabbed my arm and pulled me out the door, stumbling into the sunlight. "You shouldn't have looked at him," she said as we walked. I couldn't resist glancing back though, and there he was, following us quickly. Well, I didn't know what to do, only that he'd catch up in a few seconds. Shouldn't we tell someone? Call the cops? Something? Well, that suggestion only made my friend laugh, and she said I was hopeless. The cops would get there after the guy had done everything he wanted. And we tell someone, they might just hand us over to the guy since they don't want to get involved. She said we should turn the corner and bolt. And when we got to the corner, I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I actually fell a bit. She told me now I could look back after we were gone a distance, so I glanced back, but he wasn't there. That was probably the scariest thing I'd done in my life at that point. I couldn't stop laughing when we were in her apartment. We kept talking about what I should have done and how I goofed all over the place. Basically, I'd never have made it without her. And she told me some scary stuff about the kinds of things that happened there. People thrown off train rails, people shot, people mugged and assaulted. It was horrifying stuff. But after we were done, I had to leave and said my byes. I was walking through the streets headed to the station when I felt this odd heat on my back. Like there was a sun back there. When I turned, two cold eyes stared into mine. That man, I don't know how, but he found me and he was following me. And from what I could remember about the road I was on, it led to a long, quiet street where I'd be alone with him. So I did the dumbest thing in the world. I turned and ran across the street, disrupting the traffic. I didn't care. I was shaking so bad I could barely stand. When I reached the other side, I turned, and there he stood. He continued looking at me, and then he turned and he walked off. I've never gone there again. The educator. My cousin killed a man. When you hear something like that, you'd think that this story would be something that takes up days, weeks, or even months. But no, it was just one afternoon. This began and concluded over the course of a single afternoon. It was not terrifying. It was just an educational experience for me. I live with my mother in the big city, but due to living arrangement issues, I had to go live with my grandma for a month. What a joke. I didn't make it past that afternoon before I called my mother with vomit drooling down my face, begging her to come take me back and let me sleep in the car with her if needs be. There was no sign that that's how I'd spend that night when I arrived there. It was a sunny morning with cooling breeze when I got there that morning. I wasn't greeted as someone who hadn't been around for a year. Not because they were cruel, but everyone was so busy. I had to help too, even though I just flew into the state, cleaning the carpet, the couches, the curtains, and everything. I was working on the breakfast when the doors banged open and in walked my cousin. Let's call him Pippin. Pippin is a tall guy, about 6'3", with lots of tattoos on his neck and shoulders. I have to admit, even I was terrified by him when I saw him, but not as much as most people would be. He and I used to be close friends when we were kids, but then I left, and when I got back, he bragged about how he was drinking now and smoking. So by his estimation, he had grown up now. I don't think drinking and smoking makes you an adult. I think paying for your own apartment and car makes you an adult. So we had grown apart, to put it simply. But that does not mean we don't want things to return to the way they once were. Even though he was angry when he walked in, his demeanor changed when he saw me. He forced a smile and asked how I was, but I could tell he couldn't wait for me to finish speaking when I was explaining, so I released him and he went back to fuming with his friends. When Grandma went to sleep, Pippin and his friends kicked out the kids, and I could tell he sort of considered kicking me out too, but his friends were curious about me. So as they passed around a joint, I sat there and listened to them. At least I tried to. They speak English, like me, but I'd be lying if I said I understood any of what was said. I could grasp though that it had something to do with one of their friends being attacked by another guy or group or something like that, but whatever they were talking about was bad enough that my grandma screamed from the room and asked what they were saying. She came out furious and told them to not do any of what they said they were going to do. Even though I'd been in the room, I didn't even know they were plotting on doing something. But even in my confused state, my blood flowed a bit faster at the looks that the guys gave each other. Later, when Grandma had gone to town, I was packing my stuff in my room. That's when one of the guys walked up to me and asked if I could drive. When I said yes, he asked me to drive them. When I came out of my room, they were all standing outside my door, pretending to be speaking. I knew that they were listening in. I just didn't know why Pippin didn't come ask me himself. I'd have driven for him. I would have done so much for him. When I got in the car, I assumed we were driving to the mall or something. But then, as we drove down the streets, they kept asking me to take turns here and there. Oh, and they were loading guns. I don't know how or where they got those guns from, but they looked really big. By now, it was starting to dawn on me what was really happening. My palms became really sweaty, and my chest just hurt. I kept glancing at Pippin in the mirror, but he made no eye contact. But he made eye contact only once, then looked away the whole time. But luckily for me, we never found who we were looking for. I drove the guys home and felt as tired as a balloon. All that tension. When we were done, the only people left was me and Pippin. We didn't speak. I stopped at the store and went to buy some ice. Pippin joined me, asking me what I was studying at college. And so we spoke about my engineering degree. He looked like he was finally about to speak about what just happened when a guy at the back suddenly bolted to the door. Pippin's face turned to what I could only name a demon. He pulled out a gun from his back and gave chase. I chased him because this was getting too far. I asked him to leave him alone. I told him he shouldn't be hanging out with those guys, that he should leave them. Pippin said he can't. If he wants to leave, he needs to get the money that guy took from them and pay it back to them. And so, wanting to free my cousin, I decided to help. We chased the guy together, and I am faster. I chased the guy and speared him, knocking him down on the road. He fought, but I was part of the football team, so I could easily hold him down. Pippin arrived, huffing, and asked I follow him. And so, I dragged that man. The man, he begged me. He begged me. But I didn't know. I carried him into the alley because I didn't know. If I'd known, I wouldn't have dragged him into that place. It smelled. I hate smells. I wouldn't have forced him to his knees. I didn't see the shift in Pippin's eyes as he yelled at that man and asked if he thought he could play with them. I didn't know, even when my leg was covered in the kneeling man's pee, even as he let out one final screech, even when Pippin lifted his gun and placed it against his forehead. I thought that he would say he was joking, that there would be a last moment turn, maybe cameras popping up and saying I was on some live television show, some last moment heroic save. Maybe that was my role. If it was, I didn't play it. I played the role of the guy catching a brain with his bare hand. I ran out of there and fell down, vomiting all over the floor. My vomit was less thicker and stickier than that guy's head juices on my fingers. They stuck between my nails. Damn, I didn't know. I don't even know when I got back home. I just remember laying in bed and trying to remember. Pippin told my grandma I was almost shot by some other person or something like that. I don't know. I just know I couldn't stop smelling the metallic smell of that guy's brain juices. I decided to sleep, and I actually managed to. I didn't dream though. It was just darkness and a churning of my stomach. And then the hotness just got too hot and I felt my stomach churn, and I sat up and opened my mouth to vomit again. But no vomit came out. It was a scream that came out. I couldn't sleep again. My stomach kept churning and arching my back so painfully, yet no vomit came out. And I only got reliefs when I screamed. I called my mother. I really didn't know. I didn't. The better. I got my family stranded in the middle of the desert at night. There are a few fears of fathers. On the top of that list, it is failing to protect your family. I don't know where you'd place harming your family on the list, but it would have to be a new number not yet known to us. I was driving my family on a long road trip. My wife was snoring next to me, and my children at the back were snoring too. Admittedly, I was sleepy too. I was in a hurry to arrive where we were going, and so even though I know I should have, I didn't stop when I had the chance. That was a stupid decision, because I learned that the car's tank was running close to empty. We were an hour away from the pump station, and it would take 4 more hours for us to get to a town with a proper gas station, the GPS told me. It also told me that it would take about 2 hours to reach the next town, which was such a small town that it had one strip of road. The GPS didn't say whether this town had pump station or not, So I had to take a hard choice: continue for 2 hours with an empty tank, or hope that the coming town had a pump station, and hope that the coming town had a pump station, or turn back and drive another hour to the previous station. And so I decided to press on. I reached the next town, and it was very haunting. Each and every building seemed to have been built by the same person, possessing the same brown wood for the walls, and the same empty feel through the windows. Not a light was switched on, and it wasn't even that late. I don't think I even saw curtains. By then, I found great comfort in the fact I was in a car, which would be a comfort I would lose soon enough, but that's skipping ahead. I drove through town, and finally I spotted a run-down pump station with only one pump. The lights kept flickering on and off. As I was filling up the car, I heard a loud, sharp sound, like metal hitting something, coming from the other side. I quickly dashed around and saw there was nothing there. My son just had his forehead on the window, but that sound didn't sound like forehead hitting a window. I tried to swallow that thought as I got in the car and drove off, but it nagged at me, and so I looked at the windscreen. The pump station disappeared into darkness and reappeared with each flicker of the light. But when it flickered the third time, I swear to God, there was a silhouette of a person standing there, holding something long in their hand and watching as we drove off. I almost screamed but caught myself. It flickered again, and there was no one. It could have been my imagination. But what had happened next definitely wasn't. I turned to the dusty road, which was curtained by grass almost as tall as my car, and drove away from that town as fast as I could. Enjoying the view of the town disappearing on the rear view mirror. But then it happened. When I could cover the town with a thumb, a loud bursting sound sounded, and I stopped the car, stopping by the road. By now, I was heavily breathing and looking around, but my family was still asleep somehow. I dreaded it, but I had to go outside and look around the car. I found the cause. The wheel had two wheels on the right. The two wheels on the right of the car were in tatters. I knew I didn't have two wheels, so I had to wait there for most of the night with my son's baseball bat, waiting for help to arrive. It's only in the morning that insurance came through. That has to be one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life.